I'm assigned here, same as you.
Assigned! What good is a black hen like you? Gonna turn into fried chicken!
12 Marines laughed behind him. One aimed a phone at her face.
Say something, chicken! And get back to whatever welfare hole you came from.
Serena Ashford stood still, eyes level, jaw set tight.
You're crossing the line.
Whitman stepped closer, breath on her face.
Weak chick. Let's teach her a lesson she won't forget! Show her what real strength looks like!
Someone whooped. The camera kept rolling. She said nothing, but her fingers settled into a shape beneath the folded blanket, knuckles aligned, thumb tucked, that none of them had ever seen outside a cage fight. What happened minutes later made every single Marine look at her differently. Norfolk, Virginia, a town where the shipyard whistle blew at 6 and the rent was due by the 1st. Serena Ashford knew both sounds by heart. 28 years old, single mother, 2 jobs. Morning shift at a diner off Hampton Boulevard, night shift stacking crates at a warehouse near the docks. Her hands smelled like coffee grounds and cardboard 6 days a week. On the 7th, they smelled like cocoa butter because that was the day she braided her daughter's hair. Mila was 4, brown eyes too big for her face. She had a habit of pressing her nose against the apartment window every night, waiting for headlights. "Mommy's car?" she'd ask. Every single night. Sometimes Serena made it home before Mila fell asleep. Most nights, she didn't. The fridge stayed half empty. The electric bill stayed half paid. And the letter from the Marine Corps recruiting office stayed pinned to the corkboard for 3 months before Serena finally picked up the phone. She didn't enlist for glory. She enlisted because the sign-on bonus covered Mila's daycare through December, and the benefits package meant a doctor who wouldn't charge $200 just to look at a fever. What the recruiter didn't ask, what nobody asked, was where Serena learned to move the way she moved. Gideon Cole, her stepfather, retired Green Beret, 2 combat tours, a blown-out knee, and a philosophy that fit on a bumper sticker. The world doesn't protect small people. Small people protect themselves. He married Serena's mother when Serena was 7. By 9, after a string of break-ins shattered their block, Gideon started teaching her in the backyard. Krav Maga on Tuesdays, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on Thursdays, footwork drills on Saturdays while the neighbors grilled ribs and pretended not to watch. By 16, Serena could disarm a grown man in under 4 seconds. By 20, she'd stopped counting. But life didn't hand her a ring or a title. It handed her a pregnancy at 23, a partner who vanished before the first ultrasound, and a stack of bills that made fighting seem like a luxury from another lifetime. She packed the skills away the way some people pack winter coats. Not gone, just stored. Paris Island, South Carolina. Boot camp. Platoon 3042. Serena arrived on a Tuesday with 46 other recruits. Shaved heads, barked orders, the smell of wet concrete and shoe polish. She kept her mouth shut and her eyes open. Staff Sergeant Nolan Webb ran the platoon, 15 years in, voice like gravel dragged across sheet metal. Fair, though. He didn't care what you looked like. He cared whether you could carry your weight up a hill without dying. Serena could. She scored top 5 on the written aptitude tests, middle of the pack on physical assessments. Deliberately. Gideon had taught her that, too. Never show your whole hand. Let them think the deck is stacked against you. Then there was Bryce Whitman, 24. Blonde hair buzzed, regulation tight. Jaw like it was carved for a recruiting poster. His father, retired Colonel Grant Whitman, had his name etched on the base's legacy wall. 3 generations of Marines, all officers, all decorated. Bryce expected to graduate first in the platoon, not hoped, expected, the way some people expect sunrise. And Serena's test scores threatened that. He never said it out loud, not to the instructors anyway. But in the barracks, away from rank and regulation, Whitman made his position clear. A single black mother had no place in his Marine Corps. She was a quota, a checkbox, a weakness the system had let in to make itself feel progressive. He said it with small things first, a shoulder bump in the corridor, a tray nudged off a table, her name mispronounced on purpose, Ashford, while his crew snickered behind cupped hands. 12 of them followed his lead. 12 who laughed when he laughed, moved when he moved, looked away when he told them to look away. Serena noticed all of it. She documented none of it, not yet. But her bunkmate did. Jolene Perry, redhead from Montana, freckles, broad shoulders, and a moral compass that pointed due north without wobbling. She slept in the rack below Serena's and heard every whispered slur that drifted across the dark after lights out. Jolene kept a notebook under her mattress. Dates, times, exact words. Serena didn't know about the notebook. Not yet. Obstacle course day, week 2. Rope walls, mud crawls, a tire run that turned ankles if you landed wrong. Drill instructor Webb stood at the finish line with a stopwatch, and a face that said nothing impressed him. Serena moved through the course like water finding cracks. She cleared the wall on the first pull. She low-crawled without snagging her elbows. She hit the rope climb, final obstacle, and her hands found the rhythm Gideon had drilled into her 1,000 times. Pull, lock, breathe. Pull, lock, breathe. She was going to finish top 5. Whitman was waiting at the base of the rope. His boot caught her ankle on the dismount. Not a shove, just a slight extension of his leg at the exact right second. She hit the dirt sideways. Her ribs scraped against a wooden beam. The pain shot white behind her eyes. Webb looked up from his clipboard. "Ashford, you good?" "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Whitman was already walking away. "Even gravity doesn't want you here," he muttered, loud enough for the platoon, quiet enough for deniability. 12 Marines grinned. Nobody reported it. Nobody ever did. That night, after lights out, Serena lay in her rack staring at the ceiling. The ribs throbbed with every breath. A sound woke her at 0300, metal scraping. She looked down. Her gear locker was open, clothes dumped, boots thrown, and on the wet concrete floor, scattered like playing cards, were the photographs of Mila. Mila at the park. Mila blowing out birthday candles. Mila asleep in Serena's arms on the couch they had bought secondhand. 4 of Whitman's crew stood at the far end of the barracks, watching, waiting for the reaction. Serena climbed down, picked up every photo, one by one, her knees on cold concrete, her face showing nothing. Jolene watched from the lower bunk, fists balled under her blanket. When Serena stood back up, she placed the photos inside her pillowcase, zipped it shut. Her hands weren't shaking. They were settled, loose, fingers slightly curled, the way they rested before a fight. And in her lower bunk, Jolene Perry opened her notebook and started writing. Week 3. The harassment stopped being occasional. It became a schedule. Mondays, Whitman's crew accidentally bumped Serena during morning formation, elbows to the same ribs she'd scraped on the obstacle course. The bruise never fully healed because it never got the chance. Tuesdays, her rifle would be reassembled wrong after cleaning drills, a firing pin reversed, a bolt carrier seated backward, small enough to look like her mistake, dangerous enough to get her flagged by the armorer. "Ashford, this is the 3rd time." The armorer shook his head. "Get it together." She didn't argue. She knew who'd touched her weapon. She just didn't have proof. Wednesdays through Fridays blurred into a loop of small cruelties that never left a fingerprint. Salt in her canteen, bootlaces cut halfway through, just enough to snap during a 5-mile run. Her name scratched off the platoon duty roster and rewritten at the bottom, volunteering her for every garbage detail, every latrine scrub, every midnight fire watch. Whitman never did the work himself anymore. He delegated. A nod here, a glance there. His crew moved like extensions of his hands. And then, the mess hall. Thursday lunch. Serena carried her tray past Whitman's table. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. His palm hit the bottom of the tray. Food went up. Milk carton, mashed potatoes, green beans, all of it landed on her chest, her neck, the front of her uniform. The tray clattered on the tile floor like a cymbal crash. "Pick it up, maid." The mess hall went quiet. 60 recruits, 4 drill instructors at the far table. Nobody moved. Whitman leaned back in his chair. "I said, pick it up." Serena looked at the food on her shirt, looked at Whitman. Then she knelt down, picked up the tray, and walked to the dish return without a word. Someone at the back of the hall held up a phone. The video went into a private group chat that Whitman's crew ran. Platoon Kings. 63 members. 0 instructors. In the chat that night, Whitman typed, "Day 18 and the chicken still won't crack. Suggestions?" The replies came fast. Laughing emojis, crude memes made from screenshots of Serena's face. One suggestion, file a psych eval request, say she's unstable. One signature from a peer and she's flagged for review. Whitman filed the complaint the next morning. Anonymous. Recruit Ashford displays signs of emotional instability and may pose a risk to unit cohesion. The form landed on Staff Sergeant Webb's desk by noon. Webb read it twice. He'd been running platoons for 15 years. He knew what an unstable recruit looked like, and Ashford wasn't it. She was the quietest, most consistent performer in the unit. Her scores were climbing. Her conduct was flawless. But protocol was protocol. He had to note it in her file. He pulled her aside after afternoon drills. "Ashford, someone filed a concern about your mental fitness." Serena's face didn't change. "I'm fine, Staff Sergeant. I believe you." Webb held her gaze. "But I have to document it. Keep your head down. Keep performing." She nodded, walked away, kept performing. What Webb didn't say, couldn't say, not yet, was that he'd started watching Whitman. The pattern was too clean, too coordinated. 15 years of running platoons had taught him one thing about bullies. They always needed an audience. And Whitman's audience was exactly 12. Friday, combatives training, controlled sparring on the mats. Webb paired recruits randomly. Whitman drew a name from the hat and grinned before he even read it. Ashford. The mat was 20 feet by 20 feet, padded, referee present. Rules posted on the wall. Controlled strikes, no headshots, tap to yield. Whitman didn't follow the rules. 30 seconds in, he threw a shoulder check that sent Serena stumbling. Before she regained balance, his elbow came around, fast, sharp, illegal, and caught her in the ribs. The same ribs. The exact same spot. She dropped to one knee. Air left her lungs like someone had opened a valve. "Yield!" Whitman stood over her, arms spread for the crowd. "No!" The medic jogged over. Webb blew the whistle. Sparring ended. But the damage was done. Not to Serena's body, though that hurt enough. The damage was to the official record. If she reported the elbow, it was her word against his. If she didn't, the bruise would heal and the story would disappear. She chose silence. For now. That night after the barracks went dark, Serena sat on the floor of the latrine with her phone pressed to her ear. "Mommy, are you coming home?" "Not yet, baby, but soon. I miss you. I miss you more, Mila. So much more." She hung up, pressed the phone against her forehead, let one breath shudder out of her chest. Just one. Then she stood up and started moving. Shadowboxing. In the latrine, bare feet on cold tile, jab, cross, slip, hook. Her reflection flickered in the metal mirror. Fast, fluid, precise. Every combination Gideon had taught her, every angle, every counter, every chain that started with patience and ended with someone on the ground. She didn't know about the camera. A small hallway security camera mounted above the latrine door angled just enough to catch the movement through the gap. 15 minutes of footage, crisp enough to see every strike. Whitman found it 2 days later. He had a friend in the security office, a lance corporal who owed him a favor. The footage arrived on his phone at 2200. He watched it 3 times. The grin he usually wore when talking about Serena was gone. In its place, something that looked a lot like doubt. He showed it to his crew. She's been hiding this. One of them, Marine number 4, a wrestler from Ohio named Trent Ballard, shook his head slowly. Bro, that's not some gym class stuff. That's real. Whitman closed the video, set his phone down. His jaw worked side to side the way it did when he was calculating. Doesn't matter, he said. She's still just one person. But his voice had changed, and everyone in the room heard it. Sunday, the one-morning boot camp slowed down enough to breathe. Serena sat on the concrete steps behind the barracks with a borrowed phone pressed to her ear. Not Mila this time. Gideon. They're escalating, she said, kept her voice flat, matter-of-fact, the way he'd taught her to report a threat. Gideon was quiet for 3 seconds. Then, how many? 12. 1 leader, the rest follow. Are they trained? Basic combatives, sloppy, they muscle through everything. Another pause. She heard him exhale. Slow, controlled, the breath of a man who'd spent 30 years turning chaos into geometry. Control the distance. Let them commit first. Finish clean. Don't chase. Don't showboat. And Serena, document everything before it gets physical. Timestamps, witnesses, photos. Jolene's been keeping a notebook. Good. That notebook is your second weapon. She hung up and found Jolene in the laundry room. They sat between dryers that shook the floor and built a case without calling it one. Dates, times, exact quotes, photos of bruises taken with a phone held under a bathroom stall door, screenshots of the Platoon Kings chat. Jolene had gotten in through a recruit who'd grown a conscience. Monday morning, Colonel Hayes posted a bulletin on the platoon board. Combat Readiness Assessment. Friday, 0800. Full contact. All recruits. Whitman read it first. He grinned. Serena read it second. She didn't. Friday, 0800. The training pit. It was an outdoor square, 40 feet across, packed sand bordered by low concrete walls, bleachers on 3 sides. The kind of space where sound bounced and every grunt carried. Colonel Hayes stood at the north end in pressed utilities, arms folded. Staff Sergeant Webb beside him with a clipboard. 4 other drill instructors lined the east wall. 200 recruits filled the bleachers, not just Platoon 3042, but neighboring platoons who'd heard rumors all week. The rules were posted on a whiteboard. Full contact grappling, controlled strikes above the waist, referee stops the match on submission or inability to continue. Standard combat readiness assessment protocol. Whitman volunteered first. Of course he did. I'll take Ashford. A murmur rippled through the bleachers. Webb looked at Hayes. Hayes looked at the roster, then at Serena. Ashford, you accept? She stepped onto the sand. Yes, sir. Whitman bounced on his toes, rolled his neck, played to the crowd with a grin that said this would be fast, fun, and over before lunch. Serena stood still, hands at her sides, weight centered, breathing through her nose. The whistle blew. Whitman charged, a straight bull rush, shoulders low, arms wide, the kind of attack that worked on people who panicked. Serena didn't panic. She stepped left at the last half second. Her right hand caught his wrist. Her left hip dropped beneath his center of gravity, and the momentum he'd built did the rest. Whitman flipped. His back hit the sand with a sound like a mattress dropped from a rooftop. The air left his lungs in one visible gasp. His eyes went wide. Not from pain, but from confusion. He'd never been on the ground this fast in his life. 3 seconds. The ref looked at Webb. Webb looked at Hayes. Nobody blew the whistle. Whitman scrambled up, face red, sand in his teeth. Lucky grab. Before he could reset, Marine number 2 stepped off the bleachers. Tyler Dunn, 6'2", 220, a former high school linebacker who still led with his head. My turn. No one stopped him. Dunn came in low. Serena let him get close enough to commit, then dropped her level, underhooking his right arm and sweeping his lead leg in one motion. He went down sideways. She locked an arm bar before he hit the ground. He tapped in 8 seconds. The bleachers started buzzing. Marines number 3 and number 4 came together. Trent Ballard, the wrestler from Ohio, and a stocky redhead named Craig Voss. They spread wide, trying to flank her. Serena moved backward, drew them toward each other. When Ballard lunged, she redirected him into Voss with a hip check that sent both stumbling. Before they untangled, she swept Ballard's ankle. He dropped, then drove a palm strike into Voss's solar plexus. Not hard enough to injure, hard enough to shut his body down for 10 seconds. Both on the sand. 12 seconds total. Webb's pen stopped moving on the clipboard. He was just watching now. Marines number 5 through number 8 didn't wait for an invitation. They came as a group. 4 men moving in a loose semicircle, each one outweighing Serena by at least 40 pounds. She backed toward the concrete wall, gave herself a surface. When the first one reached her, she used the wall as a springboard, pushing off to redirect her momentum into a knee strike that caught number 5 in the chest. He folded. Number 6 grabbed her shoulder. She trapped his hand, twisted, and drove his own elbow into number 7, who was closing from the left. Both buckled. Number 8 threw a wild overhand right. Serena ducked it, stepped through, and hip-tossed him over her thigh. He landed flat. Didn't get up right away. The sand looked like a diagram of bad decisions. 4 bodies, 1 woman standing. Silence from the bleachers. Then someone in the back row started clapping, just 1 person. Then 5. Then 20. Whitman was on his feet at the edge of the pit. Get up, all of you, get up! Marines number 9 through number 12 rushed in together. No formation, no plan, just anger and numbers. Serena met them in the center of the pit. What happened next took 11 seconds. She pivoted left, catching number 9 with a straight palm to the chin. Not a punch, a redirect that sent his head snapping back and his balance gone. While he fell, she'd already turned into number 10, catching his charging momentum with a Krav Maga clinch, both hands behind his neck, knee to the body, release, shove him into number 11. They collided, staggered. Number 12, the biggest, the angriest, came from her blind side. Serena heard him. Gideon had trained that into her bones. Footsteps on sand have a signature. Heavy heel, dragging toe, closing fast. She spun, a full rotation. Her elbow caught number 12 across the jaw on the way around. His legs went liquid. He dropped straight down like someone had cut his strings. The last 2, number 10 and number 11, still tangled, looked at each other. Looked at Serena. Looked at the sand covered in groaning Marines. They stepped back, hands up. Done. Total elapsed time, 2 minutes and 41 seconds. 12 Marines, 1 sequence. The bleachers erupted. 200 recruits on their feet. The sound hit the concrete walls and came back doubled. Someone was screaming. Someone was crying. Someone was holding up a phone that had been recording since the first whistle. Staff Sergeant Webb stood with the clipboard pressed against his chest. His mouth was open. He closed it, opened it again, closed it. Colonel Hayes hadn't moved. His arms were still folded, but his chin was lifted, just slightly, the way a man lifts his chin when he's watching something he'll tell his grandchildren about. Serena stood in the center of the pit, sand on her knees, sweat running down her temples. Her breathing was controlled, in through the nose, out through the mouth, the way Gideon had drilled 10,000 times. She didn't flex, didn't shout, didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Whitman. He was standing at the edge of the sand, right arm hanging at an angle that arms weren't supposed to hang. Dislocated shoulder. He'd tried to grab number 9 when number 9 stumbled into him, and the physics had punished him for it. The video hit TikTok by noon. Boot camp mom destroys 12 Marines in under 3 minutes. 14 million views in 48 hours. The comment section became a war zone of its own, half the internet calling Serena a hero, half calling it staged. The hashtag wrote itself. Hashtag weak chick. By Saturday night, it was trending in 11 countries. By Sunday morning, Whitman had called his father. "I want her gone," he said, cradling his arm in a sling he'd made from a pillowcase. "File the paperwork. All of it." On the other end of the line, retired Colonel Grant Whitman said 2 words. Already started. 72 hours after the video went viral, the Marine Corps did what institutions do when cameras catch something they didn't plan for. They opened an investigation. The charge arrived on Monday morning in a manila envelope slid under Staff Sergeant Webb's office door. Article 128, assault. Accused, recruit Serena Ashford. The complaint alleged excessive and premeditated force during the supervised training exercise, resulting in injuries to 12 fellow recruits. 12 signatures at the bottom, 12 matching statements, 12 versions of the same story. She attacked without provocation. She targeted vulnerable areas. She refused to stop when opponents signaled yield. Webb read it twice, set it down, picked up his phone and dialed Colonel Hayes. "Sir, you were standing right there." "I know what I saw, Staff Sergeant. But 12 sworn statements outweigh one colonel's impression. This goes to a hearing." The paperwork moved fast, too fast. By Tuesday afternoon, Serena's barracks were searched, her personal items inventoried, her phone confiscated. The photos of Mila, the same ones Whitman's crew had scattered on the floor 2 weeks earlier, were cataloged as personal effects held pending investigation. They took her daughter's pictures and put them in an evidence bag. Serena sat on the edge of her stripped rack and stared at the wall. Jolene stood in the doorway. "This is wrong." "I know. We have the notebook. We have the screenshots. We have—" "Not yet." Serena's voice was steady. "Not until we have a lawyer who will actually listen." The Marine Corps assigned one, Captain Drew Holloway, 29 years old, JAG Corps, 2 years out of law school, wire-rimmed glasses, a nervous habit of clicking his pen, and a caseload that was mostly equipment theft and DUI appeals. He walked into the interview room, sat down across from Serena, and opened a folder that was already 2 inches thick. "Recruit Ashford, you're charged with assault on 12 Marines during a combat readiness assessment. The evidence includes 12 written statements, medical reports documenting injuries ranging from contusions to a dislocated shoulder, and a viral video with," he checked his notes, 22 million views as of this morning. 22 million, Serena repeated. "The prosecution's argument is straightforward. You used skills far beyond standard recruit-level combatives. You didn't stop when opponents were clearly outmatched, and the injuries suggest intent to harm, not defend." Serena looked at him. "Did you watch the video, Captain?" Holloway paused. "I watched the viral clip, the one everyone's seen." "Watch it again, frame by frame. Count who moves first in every single engagement." He blinked, wrote something down, clicked his pen 3 times. Outside the legal offices, the media was already building its narrative. The viral clip had jumped from TikTok to cable news. CNN ran a split-screen debate. Marine mom, self-defense hero, or out-of-control recruit. Fox aired Whitman's father, retired Colonel Grant Whitman, in a pre-recorded interview, jaw tight, dress blues pressed, calling for accountability and proper discipline. "This isn't about race," Grant Whitman said into the camera. This is about a recruit who used unauthorized combat techniques to injure my son and his fellow Marines. The interviewer didn't ask why 12 trained Marines had challenged one woman in sequence. Nobody on the panel did. Twitter split down the middle. Hashtag Justice for Serena trended alongside hashtag Dangerous Mom. Someone dug up Serena's waitress job in Norfolk and posted her diner's Yelp page. It got flooded with one-star reviews from strangers who'd never eaten there. Someone else found Mila's daycare and called in a welfare concern. The daycare director, a 60-year-old woman named Brenda, who'd known Mila since she was 2, hung up the phone and locked the front door. Back on base, Jolene Perry tried to submit a counterstatement. She walked into the administrative office with her notebook, 3 weeks of dates, times, quotes, and photographs, and asked to file a formal rebuttal on behalf of recruit Ashford. The clerk looked at the notebook, looked at Jolene, picked up the phone. 30 minutes later, Jolene was sitting in front of a lieutenant she'd never met. He didn't introduce himself. He said one sentence. "Recruit Perry, are you aware that filing a frivolous countercomplaint during an active Article 128 investigation can be classified as insubordination under Article 91? Jolene stared at him. "Frivolous? That's the word I used." She left the office with the notebook still in her hand, unopened, unread, unsubmitted. That night, Serena's story was the 3rd highest trending topic globally. Her face was on screens in 30 countries. People who'd never worn a uniform in their life had opinions about what she should have done, could have done, would have done. And Serena sat in a room with a metal table and no windows, waiting for a lawyer who plicked his pen too much to decide whether she was worth fighting for. Holloway went home that night and did what Serena asked. He pulled the viral video onto his laptop, slowed it to quarter speed, and he watched, frame by frame, every engagement, every first move. In all 12 matchups, the opponent moved first, every single time. Whitman charged, Dunn lunged, Ballard and Voss flanked. Marines 5 through 12 rushed. Serena responded. Every motion she made was a reaction, precise, proportional, and initiated only after the threat was in motion. He watched it 4 times. On the 5th viewing, he started making a timeline. Frame numbers, body positions, who committed first, how Serena's response matched standard self-defense doctrine. By midnight, his legal pad was full. His pen had stopped clicking. Then he found something else, the base security system. Every building on Paris Island had exterior cameras. Most recruits didn't think about them. Most investigators didn't check them. The viral video was the obvious evidence, and everyone assumed it showed the whole story. Holloway requested the security footage from the training pit perimeter. 4 cameras, 4 angles. The request came back in 20 minutes. The base IT office was still awake because half of them were watching the TikTok on repeat. Camera 3, northwest corner. It caught what no phone in the bleachers could see. The 60 seconds before the first whistle. Whitman, approaching Serena at the edge of the pit, leaning in, his mouth moving. Serena stepping back, Whitman following, his finger in her face, her hands at her sides. No audio, but the body language was a transcript. Holloway sat back in his chair, took his glasses off, put them back on. Then he pulled up the base's internal incident report database and typed in one name, Bryce Whitman. 3 prior complaints, all from female recruits, all withdrawn within 72 hours. Holloway closed his laptop, opened a new legal pad, wrote one word at the top in block letters. Premeditation. The hearing convened on a Wednesday in Building 411, a windowless conference room that the Marine Corps used for administrative tribunals when they wanted proceedings to feel serious but stay quiet. It didn't stay quiet. The hallway outside was packed. Recruits, instructors, officers who had no business being there but came anyway. 2 Marine Corps public affairs officers stood by the exit monitoring phones. A military journalist from Stars and Stripes sat in the back row with a notepad. Colonel Hayes presided. 3-member panel beside him. Prosecution on the left. Major Elaine Caldwell, 15 years JAG, a record of convictions that made defense attorneys request transfers. Defense on the right. Captain Drew Holloway, wire-rimmed glasses, 2 legal pads, and a pen he hadn't clicked once since walking in. Serena sat behind Holloway and pressed utilities, hands flat on the table. Face unreadable. Whitman sat on the prosecution side, arm in a regulation sling, his jaw set in a performance of pain that had been rehearsed in the mirror that morning. Behind him, 11 Marines in a row, bruised, bandaged, and coached. Grant Whitman, retired colonel, dress blues, silver eagles still pinned to his collar like he'd never left, sat in the gallery. Front row, arms crossed. Major Caldwell opened clean. On the morning of the assessment, Recruit Ashford engaged 12 fellow recruits in sequence. She used techniques far exceeding standard combatives training. She did not stop when opponents were visibly incapacitated. The injuries sustained, a dislocated shoulder, 3 fractured ribs across 4 individuals, multiple contusions, speak for themselves. She called Whitman first. He stood, raised his right hand, swore the oath with his left because the sling wouldn't allow the right. A nice touch. She came at me before the whistle, Whitman said, voice steady, eyes on the panel. I wasn't ready. She grabbed my arm and threw me. I heard my shoulder pop on the way down. And after that, my men came to help me. She attacked them too, one by one. They were trying to restrain her, and she kept going. Caldwell nodded. No further questions. Holloway stood, adjusted his glasses, opened his legal pad. Recruit Whitman, you said she came at you before the whistle, is that correct? Yes, sir. And your 12 crewmates, they came onto the sand to help you? That's right. To restrain a woman who weighs 138 pounds. Whitman's jaw shifted. She's dangerous. I see. Holloway reached into a folder. I'd like to play something for the panel. He connected a laptop to the room screen. The viral video appeared, but not the TikTok version. This was the base security camera. Camera 3, northwest angle, unedited, time-stamped. The room went still. The footage showed the 60 seconds before the whistle. Whitman walking toward Serena at the pit's edge, leaning into her space, his finger pointed at her face, his mouth moving. No audio, but the aggression was unmistakable. Serena stepping backward, once, twice, 3 times. Whitman following each step. Then the whistle, and Whitman charging. Recruit Whitman, Holloway's voice was quiet. In this footage, who moves toward whom before the match begins? Silence. Who raises a hand first? Silence. And who charges after the whistle? You or Recruit Ashford? Whitman looked at his father in the gallery. Grant Whitman's arms were still crossed, but his jaw had unlocked. Something behind his eyes was recalculating. I was getting in position, Whitman said. With your finger in her face. That's not. Let me move on. Holloway pulled a second folder. I'd like to submit documentation compiled by recruit Jolene Perry over a 3-week period. Dates, times, and direct quotes of harassment directed at Recruit Ashford by Recruit Whitman and his associates. He read selections aloud. The salt in the canteen, the sabotaged rifle, the mess hall tray, the anonymous psych evaluation complaint, the Platoon Kings group chat, screenshots projected on screen, messages visible to every person in the room. Day 18 and the chicken still won't crack. Suggestions? The panel member on the left, a female captain, set her pen down and pressed her lips together. Holloway wasn't finished. I'd also like to enter into record 3 prior harassment complaints filed against Recruit Whitman by female recruits in previous training cycles. All 3 were withdrawn within 72 hours of filing. The room shifted. A low murmur ran through the gallery like wind through tall grass. Major Caldwell stood. Objection. Prior complaints are not relevant to... They're relevant to pattern, Holloway said, and to credibility. Hayes looked at the panel. The panel looked at each other. Overruled. Continue. Holloway played the viral video one more time. Slow motion. He narrated each engagement like a boxing commentator working a replay. Marine 1, Whitman, charges. Ashford redirects. Marine 2, Dunn, lunges. Ashford counters. Marines 3 and 4 flank. Ashford repositions. Frame by frame. 12 engagements. In every single one, the opponent initiated contact first. Serena's movements were reactive, proportional, and, as Holloway pointed out, consistent with recognized self-defense doctrine taught in advanced military combatives programs. She didn't attack 12 Marines, Holloway said. 12 Marines attacked her. She survived. The room was silent. Then Whitman broke, not dramatically, not with a scream or a confession. He broke the way pressure cracks break concrete, a line that starts small and runs fast. She doesn't belong here. His voice was louder than it should have been. His good hand gripped the table edge. She's a single mother. She's not a Marine. She shouldn't have been allowed in. The Corps has standards and she doesn't meet them. Hayes spoke for the first time. Recruit Whitman. The Corps' standards are applied at the recruiting office, not in your barracks. And last I checked, being a mother and being a Marine are not mutually exclusive. Whitman opened his mouth, closed it. Grant Whitman stood up in the gallery, walked to the exit, opened the door, left without a word. The door closed behind him with a sound that every person in the room would remember. Holloway submitted one final exhibit, the hallway security footage. The video Whitman himself had obtained from the security office. The metadata showed it was downloaded to Whitman's personal device 6 days before the assessment. He watched her train, Holloway said. He knew exactly what she was capable of. And he provoked her anyway. This wasn't self-defense gone wrong. This was a setup that backfired. Hayes turned to the panel. They didn't need long. Charges against recruit Ashford dismissed. Countercharges filed. Harassment, evidence tampering, conduct unbecoming a Marine, against recruit Bryce Whitman and 6 members of his crew. Serena's face didn't change. No smile, no tears. No fist in the air. She sat still with her hands flat on the table the same way she'd sat through every minute of the hearing. Then she leaned toward Holloway and said 5 words. Can I call my daughter now? The consequences came fast. The Marine Corps didn't drag its feet when cameras were involved, and the footage was this clean. Bryce Whitman received a dishonorable discharge. The paperwork was processed within 72 hours of the tribunal's ruling. A speed that surprised no one who'd seen the security footage played on a loop in every briefing room on base. His service record was flagged, his benefits revoked. The career his father had mapped out before Bryce could walk was over before his shoulder healed. 6 of his crew, including Tyler Dunn and Trent Ballard, were demoted in rank and reassigned to separate installations across the country. No 2 of them would serve on the same base again. The Marine Corps had a term for it. Dispersion. It sounded clinical. It meant exile. 2 others, the ones who'd filed the anonymous psych evaluation and the one who'd leaked the security footage to Whitman, faced criminal charges under Article 134, general misconduct, evidence tampering, the kind of charges that didn't end in reassignment. They ended in Leavenworth. Retired Colonel Grant Whitman's name was removed from the legacy wall at Parris Island. The plaque came down on a Thursday morning. No ceremony, no announcement. Just 2 maintenance workers with a drill and a cardboard box. By lunch, the wall had a rectangular patch of lighter paint where the plaque had been. Nobody filled it. Grant issued no public statement. His social media accounts went dark. A reporter from the Military Times called his home number 3 times. The third time, the number was disconnected. Serena completed boot camp on schedule. She didn't just complete it. She graduated honor graduate, first in her platoon of 46 recruits. The highest combined score in physical fitness, marksmanship, and academic testing that Platoon 3042 had recorded in 11 years. Staff Sergeant Webb read her name at the ceremony. His voice didn't crack, but it came close. Graduation day, Paris Island Parade Ground, August heat pressing down like a hand on the chest. 200 recruits in formation. Families in folding chairs. A Marine Corps band playing something that sounded like Pride set to brass. Serena stood in the front row, pressed uniform, shoulders back, eyes forward, and then she heard it. "Mommy!" Mila broke free from the family section like a small comet. 4 years old, braids bouncing, sandals slapping the asphalt. She ran across the parade ground with the kind of speed that only children who've been counting days can produce. Serena broke formation. She didn't ask permission. She didn't look at Webb. She dropped to one knee and caught her daughter mid-stride, pulling her in so tight that Mila's feet left the ground. "Mommy, you're here." "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." Nobody told her to get back in line. Webb pretended to check his clipboard. The recruit behind Serena wiped his eyes with his sleeve and hoped nobody noticed. Colonel Hayes walked the line to pin each graduate's eagle, globe, and anchor, the emblem that turned a recruit into a Marine. When he reached Serena, he paused. Mila was still in her arms, face buried in Serena's neck. Hayes pinned the emblem on Serena's collar with Mila watching from 6 inches away. "The Corps needed you more than you needed us," he said, quiet enough that only she heard it. Then he did something that broke protocol in a way that nobody would ever report. He saluted her. A colonel saluting a private, in front of every officer, every DI, every recruit on the parade ground. Webb saw it. He didn't blink. He snapped to attention and saluted too. One by one, the drill instructors followed, then the recruits, then the families in the chairs, civilians who didn't know the protocol, standing with their hands over their hearts because it felt like the right thing to do. Serena held Mila with one arm and returned the salute with the other. That evening, the Pentagon's Office of Diversity and Readiness sent an email to Colonel Hayes. Subject line, "Recruit Ashford, Program Development Opportunity." They'd watched the tribunal. They'd watched the video. They wanted Serena to help design a new anti-bullying and self-defense training program for female recruits across all boot camp installations. Hayes forwarded the email to Webb. Webb forwarded it to Serena. Serena read it sitting on her rack, the same rack Whitman had kicked 5 weeks earlier. She set the phone down, looked at the photo of Mila she'd taped back to her locker door, and for the first time since arriving at Paris Island, she smiled. On the base's internal message board, someone had already updated Platoon 3042's motto. The old one was standard issue Latin that nobody remembered. The new one was 4 words long. #never underestimate. Platoon 3042, 2 years later. Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Building 9, East Wing. A room that used to store surplus mats and broken heavy bags had been converted into the base's first dedicated women's combat training center. The walls were painted marine green. The floor was new. Regulation mats, tight seams, no curled edges. A banner above the door read, "Strength has no gender." Staff Sergeant Serena Ashford ran the room. She was the first female lead instructor in the Marine Corps martial arts program at Camp Lejeune. Not the first to apply, not the first to qualify. The first to be specifically requested, by name, by the commanding general, based on a tribunal transcript and a TikTok video that had crossed 300 million views and still climbed. Her morning started at 0500. 30 recruits, all women, all volunteers. Some were fresh out of boot camp with bruises still yellow on their shins. Some were career Marines who'd spent a decade pretending that certain things didn't happen in barracks after lights out. Serena taught them what Gideon had taught her: distance management, threat assessment, the difference between aggression and control, how to turn someone's momentum into their own problem. She didn't lecture, she demonstrated. And every recruit who walked through that door learned one lesson before they learned any technique. The strongest thing you can do is stay calm when someone expects you to break. 412 women completed the program in its first 18 months. 3 went on to special operations selection, the first female candidates from Camp Lejeune in base history. 11 filed harassment reports they'd been sitting on for years, because now they had the language, the confidence, and the precedent. Serena's name was the precedent. Jolene Perry stood at the front of the room beside her, assistant instructor. She'd completed officer candidate school 6 months earlier and chosen to return to Camp Lejeune instead of taking a deployment assignment. When asked why, she said, "Someone kept a notebook for me once. I figured I'd return the favor." The notebook itself, the original, with 3 weeks of dates, times, and direct quotes, was now part of the Marine Corps' official training curriculum on recognizing and documenting workplace harassment. It was cited in a Pentagon policy brief. Jolene's handwriting was projected on screens in classrooms across 4 installations. Mila was 6 now, first grade. She told her classmates her mother's job with the casual authority that only 6-year-olds possess. "My mom teaches Marines how to be brave." Her teacher called Serena about it. Not a complaint, a request. "Would you come speak to the class? The kids haven't stopped talking about it." Serena said yes. She showed up in uniform. 23 first graders stared at her like she'd walked out of a movie. Mila sat in the front row with her arms crossed and her chin lifted, the exact posture Colonel Hayes had held at the edge of the training pit 2 years earlier. One evening after the last class of the day, Serena was wiping down the mats when the door opened. A young woman stood in the frame, early 20s, duffel bag on the floor, eyes red, hands shaking. "Staff Sergeant Ashford? That's me. I just got here, first day." Her voice cracked. Someone told me to come find you, that you'd understand." Serena hung the towel on the rack, walked over, stood close enough that the young woman could see her eyes, but far enough that she had room to breathe. "First day?" The girl nodded. Serena held out her hand. "You belong here, I promise." The girl took it, squeezed, didn't let go for a long time. Outside, the sun was dropping behind the pine trees that lined the base perimeter. The training center's lights clicked on, automatic, fluorescent, the same flat light that illuminated every Marine Corps building from Paris Island to Pendleton. But inside that room, just for a moment, the light felt different. If Serena Ashford's story moved you, if it made you think about someone who was counted out before they got their chance, drop your story in the comments. Tell us about the time someone underestimated you. Share this video with the person in your life who needs to hear it today. And hit subscribe, because we've got more stories coming. Stories about people who were told they weren't enough and proved everyone wrong.
The story is over, but one thing keeps sticking with me. We usually think strong people react. Somebody pushes you, you push back. Somebody disrespects you, you fire back. That's what movies teach us. The quicker the clap back, the stronger you look. But the story taught me the opposite. The strongest person in any situation is almost never the one who reacts first. It's the one who absorbs and waits, who takes the hit, stays quiet, and chooses the moment. Not because they can't fight back, because they are deciding when to. That's what people miss. We confuse patience with weakness. We see somebody stay quiet while being pushed around and think they can't handle it. But sometimes That quiet person is the most dangerous one in the room. Not because they are violent, because they have the one thing the loud person doesn't control. Here's the thing: the person who's loud, who's pushing, who's performing, they need your reaction. That's the whole game. Without your flinch, their power disappears. The moment you stop giving them what they want, they escalate, they overcommit, they expose themselves, and that's when the quiet person moves. So the lesson isn't be patient. The lesson is patience is a weapon. The person who controls when they respond controls the entire situation every time. If you had been in that training pit, would you have stayed calm? I read every command. Hit like, subscribe. See you next time.